We're going to be breaking down getting $1 million net worth in real estate in a multifamily deal.
Okay.
We're going to break it down doing a debt model and a equity partnership model also.
Okay, perfect. So let's establish the market is Cleveland. All right, Cleveland, Ohio.
Yep.
Ohio. And you're buying a 40 unit property. It has, buying them at $50,000 a piece per unit. So you're buying this thing for $2 million. Let's call it appraised value is $3 million on day of purchase, but you're gonna do a value add. So value add after, let's call it 2 years, is going to get you to a 3.5 valuation. So that's the overall deal itself. Rents coming in, let's call them $1,000 a unit. So 1,000 per door. Cash flow will be 100 per door. It's industry standard, 100 per door cash flow. Now, if we were to do this via debt, so we'll start with the debt function, the marker that works. The debt function on this side is my preferred. So you're gonna go with, we'll call it maximum 12% interest, 100% financing, private money, hard money combination. And so now you owe $20,000 a month. Because of the 50% rule, this portfolio is pulling in 40,000 times 10, so 40,000 a month. So minus the 40K per month. 50% rule says 20% is going to go to expenses. So you're break even, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason the debt model makes sense is not on the cash flow, but on the equity side. Let's say a year from now, or 2 years from now, 1 year goes by. We'll do year one. 1 year goes by, your equity position's $1 million. Because you didn't have to owe, you didn't pay anything to your partners, you didn't pay anything to the bank. Equity-wise, you have an equity position of $1 million. Year two goes by, 2 years. You've now done your forced appreciation play, where you've got an additional $500,000 out of it. You now have $1.5 million in equity. That's the equity play. Let's shift and we'll talk about syndication. We'll talk about partnership. So equity, so now we're in, this is an equity play. Yeah? So this above here was the debt play, this is gonna be the equity play. Let's say you give everybody 50-50. So it's a 50-50 partnership. They've brought the money, so you didn't have to pay any extra cash for the money. Let's say the mortgage is a little bit lower, but you're paying them half or a majority of the cash flow. So let's say instead of that additional $500,000 that you had to borrow from partners, you're saving yourself $5,000 a month. $5,000 monthly cash flow, but that goes to the partners. You could, I've seen a lot of investors do this, split this in half, right? You're 50-50, so you can split this in half. You're getting $2,500 a month. So are they. Everybody's happy. These guys invested $500,000 and they're getting a 5% return on investment, COC, cash on cash.
Yep.
So 5% COC for them, but for you, you put no money into it, wonderful cash flow. You're making $30,000 a year. You're both making $30,000 a year. For them, it's a small return. For you, it's an extraneous return, really big. But let's call it year one goes by. Year one, you've made 30K. Year two goes by, now you've made 60K, if you add up both years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've made 60K. 2 years up here, you made $1.5 million. Come back to that. 2 years down here, you made 60K plus the property has been appraised at $3.5 million. and now you're splitting that equity with your partners. So you have 750K plus your 60K that you've earned over the 2 years. So let's call it 810K. Your partners are happy. They got their 500K back that they invested initially. Plus they got an additional 750K on top of it. So they've got a return on investment of 1.5 times. So a wonderful 150% return on investment. So they walk away with 750. Now in this equity deal, your investors really win, right? They're winning because they're getting this massive access to equity. Your net worth is only 800, well, it's only 750 plus you lived off of the 60K of money, of the monthly income. So the difference ends up being half. You lost $750,000 by doing an equity partnership, which is totally fine to do if you can't sustain the debt on the asset.
Yep.
So in this, you didn't make any cash flow. In this one, you got to make $30,000 a year. So what happens with a lot of investors is they'll do syndication, they'll do equity partnerships, and they'll lose access to half of their equity. Mm-hmm. Because they're just being short-sighted and saying, I need the cash flow, I need the $30,000 a year, or the $60,000, I need that cash flow, I need that cash flow. We invest for the equity. Mm-hmm. And then if we hold it long enough, we get the cash flow.
Okay. And then my natural question would be, what are the risks with each side of the equation? So I want to know, what are the risks to the debt model and also the equity structure?
Yep. So risks here is over leverage. If for some reason your occupancy goes down, you're having a hard time filling the unit, there's more expenses than you can handle, you now start losing money every single month. In the debt model, you can lose because you're over leveraged, and you can end up losing the property from over leverage. In the equity model, if you lose units, you're not able to pay your investors, all you lost is your cash flow. So nobody's getting a COC, and you could do a capital raise with your partners. It's easier to do a capital raise from people who have equity in the deal because they have access to this bigger, larger number. When you have debt investors, it's a lot harder to get them to bring more money to a deal. Unless, they have that relationship and they're looking for more money to be worked. Equity partners kind of will go borrow money because they don't want to lose the money they've already invested. Debt partners know that they can always foreclose on this property and get access to all of this equity. So in a worst case scenario, you're over leveraged in a debt position. And in a worst case scenario in the equity, your investors lose money, but you didn't really lose as much. Let's say you lost this property. In this scenario, your debt investors are losing almost nothing because they get the property back, but you would lose everything. And in this scenario, you lose access to your equity.
And then with both models, how do you, mitigate your risk?
Yeah, so no matter what, real estate investing comes down to fill your units. It's just, it always comes down to the same thing, cash flow. Increase units, increase occupancy. There's three functions: increase occupancy, increase rents, and decrease expenses. Sometimes we've had to say, just go back 10 and be like, yeah, we're gonna fix that. Yeah, we're just not gonna fix it this month. Prioritize renovations. I've had tenants be like, hey, I really need my floors done. And I'll walk the unit, it's like, yeah, I see how your floors kind of suck, but when it comes to safety, your floors don't need to be done, and your dog is the cause for the floor being torn up this way. So we will do the floor, but it's gonna be 3 months from now. As long as it's not a safety issue. If it's safety, we're gonna come in, we'll patch really quick, but we're not gonna replace the whole floor. We'll patch the section, it's gonna be ugly, but it'll be clean and safe. So decrease expenses, increase rents, and increase occupancy. You do that, you're gonna be fine.
And also, I would say, because you mentioned this to me earlier, just your underwriting has to be
tight. You make your money on the purchase.
Yeah, and so how would you let's say we do the over leveraged well, not over leverage, sorry. Let's say we use the debt model.
I love how you call it the over leverage model. It is. You can certainly
Yeah.
over leverage with this model.
So let's say we do the debt model, and knowing you, because you can do the numbers a lot faster than me. At what number would you feel like, in terms of the monthly revenue? What number would you feel comfortable at? Let's say, I don't know. Let's say it was making $60K a month. Would you pull the trigger on that, or? And also, too, at what number are you like, I will definitely not do this deal? And at what number are you kind of like a little on edge, I guess?
It's tough. Let me go back. I'm gonna wipe this, but let me go back and state that we just did a deal, 35 units, that we're only paying $9,800 a month, and we paid 1.2 million for it. So our purchase price was 1.25 million. So if you look at 35 units,
1.4.
1.4 was with the debt. So that was with renovation money included into it. So we borrowed $175,000 to do renovations. So that was included, but that wasn't the purchase price. The purchase price was actually 1.2 million.
No,
So
that's the loan amount.
the loan amount, yes, love, the loan amount was 1.425.
No.
1.4.
Is the purchase price, 1.239 is the loan that includes 175.
So 1.2 was our debt. Is that correct?
1239.
1239. So purchase price was, what was it again? 1.425?
Yes.
Okay, 1.425.
Yes.
Got it, thank you. And then we borrowed 175 for renovations. That was reno. So 35 units, reno was 175, so we're into this thing 1.6 million. Another question again?
Yeah. So with your underwriting, at what number did it like make absolute sense? Like, I'm pulling the trigger on this. This is what we're gonna buy it at.
Okay. So one, we bought this at a 7% cap rate. That goes against our traditional rule. Our traditional rule is we buy at a 10 cap and we sell at a 6. We bought it at 7 because it was 60% vacant. So technically we bought it at a 7, but we started filling the units up really quickly. So we were only making $9,800 on day one. Now we've been into this probably 7 months now, Dorina? 7 months?
Yeah.
7 months later, we're pulling in 21K. 21, I think it's 800 per month. So this goes against what I normally would have purchased for this. I would have paid significantly less. I probably would have paid closer to 1.2. That's probably why that number keeps showing up in my head, is that's what I would have liked to pay. Why did I buy this? Because Dorina wired the money right away. And yeah, she hates hearing this part of the story because I always blame her. I'm like, well, if you didn't wire it, I would have negotiated harder. But because they were holding our non-refundable deposit, we're kind of stuck in a position. So we paid what I think is 200K over what I would have liked to pay. But because we've gotten the rents up and our debt is relatively low, we've been able to get to a $21,000 a month. We're still breaking even. When we finish our refinance, we should make about $4,000 a month. So this isn't a perfect deal. It's not ideal, but let's call it 12 months into it, which we're coming up on month 7. So we have 5 more months to go. Our rents should be, because we have 5 vacancies still after filling all these units. We had 9 units or 10 units right at the beginning that were full, or 12 units at the beginning that were full. So it was 12 occupied units. Now we only have 5 vacant, so we've got 30 units full now. Now we're at a point where we should be in 5 more months. We should be pulling in 27,800, which is a much better scenario for us. And the refinance should take our debt, our monthly payment, which is, I think our expenses are 19,000 a month. 19,000 is fixed expenses plus about 6K every month in maintenance. It just like seems to be, that number is about $6,000 maintenance. So you're talking about $25,000 every month this thing loses, or $25,000 this thing costs. So right now we're losing about, we'll call it $3,000. So we've gotten to the point where our loss is much lower. 3K per month. Now, most people couldn't sustain this. Most people could never figure this out, could never do a deal like this, could never lose that much money. We had borrowed, I want to say it was about 75K to make that loss happen. So 75K to pay for carrying costs, to pay our investors as we're going through this deal. In the beginning, you look at that 25,000 monthly expenses to the $9,000, that was a $16,000 a month loss that the property was doing every single month. Plus renovations. We were pouring all this money, this rental money into it. So there were points where if we didn't renovate fast enough, we could have lost a ton of money. But because we moved the units quickly, we turned them fast, we're now at 6 or 7 months in at just about break even. So 1 more month, it will be at that break-even point. Would I have a normal investor do this, like somebody who doesn't have a portfolio, doesn't have other streams of income?
No.
No. Like it's a risky investment. It's really over leveraged. Like we know how to push units. Like we put multiple contractors onto the project. This was a very difficult renovation. We went from 12 occupied units to 30 units in a 7-month period. Most property management companies can't do that. Most asset managers can't do that. That's a lot of work. It's really difficult to fill 18 units in a short period of time. So what happens at the end of this though? As we break this threshold, we do the refinance. The refinance saves us $4,000 a month. It's like 4K to 5K. 4K to 5K per month. Monthly. And then the units being full to 27, that reduces our expenses down to 21,000, our hard cost of 21,000. But we'll still renovate, we'll still be months. So let's call it a 3K to 6K per month cash flow. So at the end of the day, I would say it's 40 grand per year. Not terrible. Equity in the deal, that's the best part, right? This deal is appraised at 2.2 million. Today. So that would be 16 million minus this, that's 1.6 minus the 2.2, you're talking about a 600K equity position inside the property, which is okay, not $1 million, right? It's all right, but you hold it for a few years. Average appreciation on real estate is 5% per year. So if we hold it for 4 years, you're talking about an additional 20%, which would be an additional $440,000 added to this number. So we'll have an additional 400 equity in there in 4 years. So there'll be $1 million sitting in that property. 4 years from now. The coolest part about this is 6 more years, which is the length of term that we're holding it. There'll probably be an additional $600,000 to $800,000 in it, assuming the market just does what the market does. Real estate's long term. It's not a short term game. We could sell it right now, make $600,000, split them between the partners, or we could hold it and make that $40,000 a year for 10 years. An extra $400,000 on top of the equity that we're getting inside of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a deal style that is harder to pull off, right? It's very scary. It's high leverage. Some of the things we could have done differently and would have done differently would be not to pay our debt monthly and just put the debt to the end and say, hey, when we do the refinance, we'll pay you that. Another thing we could have done differently is gotten it at the 1.2 million, which would have put an extra $200,000 just right up off the front, right off the top, into our equity position, putting us closer to 800,000. So like little things could have been done better, but when we look at the overall project, we did pretty good. We're pretty happy with it. It leaves us with good cash flow every month, and like what I told Greg is we'll never do something that small again. Like we can do them, like we can do these 35 units, but it makes a lot more sense for us to do much bigger deals because nobody's getting excited about $40,000 a year. It's okay, but it was okay in the beginning. Now it's like now we need a lot more than that. Helpful?
Yeah.
So to answer the question, it really depends on what you're looking for. We needed a loss. I made too much money last year, so we needed a loss leader, something that we could do a leverage loss on. So putting this $175,000 into the property gave me $175,000 I could claim a loss on. The lack of cash flow, like this loss every single month, gave me additional money that I could claim a loss on. The cost segregation we did on the property gave me an additional $300,000 that we could claim a loss on. So there were reasons to do this type of a deal towards the end of the year if we knew we were making too much money. And I just wish we'd done a bigger deal. Doreen doesn't like losing money, regardless of the tax benefits.
Neither do I. I agree with the Russian princess.
And it's easy when you're buying 3 families like in Worcester. Like when we were doing the small deals, it's like, yeah, like no vacancy, all tenants are full. Pop 1 tenant in, it's easy to do that in 2 weeks. Popping in 18 tenants doesn't happen in 2 weeks. It takes time to stabilize these larger portfolios. It still takes 2 weeks to turn a unit, 2 weeks to get a unit on the market. So if you get a good team, you get 2 or 3 teams in there, maybe you can turn 2 or 3 units, maybe you can turn 6 to 8 units a month. You still got the units that are gonna leave. We had tenants leave us, so we had to turn those units in addition that we weren't planning on turning, and we still had to keep turning the units we were going. I think our best month during what we do, like 6 to 8 tenant, like full turns.
Yeah, it's also the property manager who was spending our money without confirming, so I think he over-renovated and because we're not there, like we couldn't really keep an eye.
Yeah, so over renovation, you gotta keep an eye on the property managers, over renovation. That was one thing that we got bitten here in our monthly expenses, but yeah, we went over budget. I want to say almost 50,000, 75,000 in this property, a little over budget, but at the end of the day, it's real estate. It'll get you. Yeah, I've never done a deal where I wasn't at least 10% over what our thought was. And I haven't met an investor who nailed it. Like there's very few, like some probably do, but I haven't met somebody say, yeah, I totally stayed within my budget. It's always 5,000, 10,000 over, or 5 or 10% over. But the investor who does, they're gonna be the first one to post, like, oh yeah, how did you mess that up? Fucking, you tried. Let's see how you do. You got all this?
Yeah.
All right, cool.